She dove into the back seat of a stranger's car in the pouring rain, mistaking it for her Uber. Her abusive ex was sprinting just seconds behind her. She didn't realize she had just invaded the private sanctuary of the Vampire King. What she whispered changed everything. He locked the doors, looked her hunter in the eye through the glass, and made a choice that started a war. She is under my protection. In the pouring rain of a Tuesday night, a girl makes a mistake that should have ended her life, but instead, it rewrites the history of a hidden kingdom. She mistakes the idling black sedan for her rideshare, throws open the door, and throws herself into the back seat with the desperation of a hunted animal. She does not see the crest on the leather seats, nor the unnatural stillness of the man behind the wheel. She does not know that she has just invaded the sanctuary of Valerius, the king of the Night Court, a predator who has not felt a spark of surprise in 3 centuries. But when she whispers her reason for trembling, the monster does not devour her. He locks the doors to keep the world out. The rain slashed against the pavement like shards of falling glass, turning the city streets into a blurred watercolor of neon and gray. Ilara didn't feel the cold soaking through her thin waitress uniform. She only felt the phantom grip of a hand on her arm and the heavy, terrifying rhythm of boots hitting the concrete behind her. Thud, thud, thud. She didn't dare look back. If she looked back, she would see his face, the twisted, possessive rage of a man who believed no was just a challenge to be overcome. Her lungs burned, filled with the metallic taste of panic and exhaust fumes. She fumbled with her phone, the screen cracked and slick with water, staring at the rideshare app. 2 minutes away. She didn't have 2 minutes. She didn't have 2 seconds. A black car sat idling at the curb, its engine a low, purring rumble that vibrated against the soles of her worn-out sneakers. It was dark, sleek, and looked like safety. It had to be him. It had to be the ride. Ilara didn't think. Survival was not a thought process, it was a reflex. She wrenched the back door open and threw herself inside, slamming it shut just as a shadow rounded the corner of the alleyway. Drive, she gasped, sliding down low in the seat, her knees pulling up to her chest. Please, just drive. The interior of the car was startlingly silent, a vacuum that swallowed the cacophony of the storm outside. It smelled not of stale air freshener and cigarettes, but of rich, aged leather, sandalwood, and something cooler, sharper, like the scent of ozone before a lightning strike. The car did not move. Panic flared in Ilara's chest, hot and suffocating. She looked up, her eyes wide, darting to the rearview mirror to plead with the driver. "Did you hear me?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "You have to go. The light is green. Please." The man in the driver's seat did not turn around. He was motionless, a statue carved from midnight. Through the dim light of the dashboard, she saw only the silhouette of broad shoulders clad in a suit that looked far too expensive for a rideshare driver, and hair the color of a raven's wing, perfectly styled despite the storm outside. "You are in the wrong vehicle," the man said. His voice was a physical thing. It was deep, resonating through the chassis of the car, smooth as velvet, but with an underlying edge that sounded like a blade being drawn from a sheath. It wasn't a question. It was a dismissal. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She reached for the door handle, her fingers trembling, but then she saw him. Through the rain-streaked window, he was there. Mark. He was standing on the curb, his chest heaving, his eyes scanning the street with a predatory focus. He looked right at the black car. Ilara froze. If she opened the door now, she was dead. Or worse. She let go of the handle and shrank back into the leather, making herself as small as possible. Tears, hot and humiliating, spilled over her lashes. "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the drumming of the rain on the roof. "I know I'm in the wrong car. But please, don't make me get out." The man in the front seat shifted. For the first time, he turned his head slightly. His profile was cut from marble, sharp nose, high cheekbones, and a jawline that spoke of uncompromising authority. He didn't look at her directly, but she felt the weight of his attention. It was heavy, suffocating, and ancient. "Give me one reason," he said, his tone devoid of pity, Why I should not unlock this door and leave you to your fate. Alara looked out the window. Mark was stepping off the curb, walking toward the car, squinting through the tint. He reached out a hand, his knuckles scarred, reaching for the glass. She looked at the back of the stranger's head. She didn't have money. She didn't have weapons. She had nothing but the terrifying truth. Because, she whispered, the word trembling in the air, he says he loves me, but he's going to kill me tonight. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb or the deep ocean. Valerius, king of the Night Court, ruler of the shadowed city, and the oldest vampire in the hemisphere, stared at the reflection of the girl in his rearview mirror. He saw the terror in her wide, brown eyes. He saw the bruise blooming on her wrist where a hand had grabbed her too hard. He heard the erratic, frantic fluttering of her heart, a sound that usually made his fangs ache with hunger. But tonight, something twisted in his chest. It was a sensation he hadn't felt in centuries. Not hunger. Not boredom. Anger. He saw the human male approaching the car. The man's face was a mask of entitled rage, the kind of petty, mortal malice that Valerius found distasteful. The man reached for the door handle of the Rolls-Royce Phantom. Valerius didn't just lock the doors. He engaged the security bolts with a solid, mechanical thunk that echoed like a judge's gavel. The man outside yanked on the handle. It didn't budge. He banged his fist on the window, shouting something that was lost to the soundproofing. Valerius turned his head slowly, fully facing the window. He lowered the glass just an inch, enough for his eyes to be seen. They were not human eyes. They were the color of frozen amber, glowing with a faint, predatory luminescence. He didn't speak. He just looked. He let a fraction of his aura, the sheer weight of 600 years of apex predation, roll off him like a wave. The man outside froze. The color drained from his face so fast it was as if he had been struck by lightning. He stumbled back, tripping over his own feet, splashing into a puddle as primal instinct overrode his anger. He didn't know what he was looking at, but his DNA remembered. He was looking at death. Valerius rolled the window up. He turned back to the road, his hands pale, elegant, and strong, gripping the leather steering wheel. "Seatbelt," he commanded. Alara, stunned and shaking, fumbled with the buckle. Where are you taking me?" Valerius pressed the accelerator. The massive car surged forward, not with a roar, but with a powerful, silent glide, like a shark cutting through water. "Away," he said. The drive was a blur of lights and shadows. Alara sat rigid in the back seat, her adrenaline crashing into exhaustion. She watched the city pass by, the familiar streets giving way to the wealthier districts, and then to the winding roads that led up into the hills where the old money lived. She stole glances at the driver. He drove with an effortless grace, one hand resting casually on the wheel while the other adjusted the cuff of his suit jacket. He was terrifyingly beautiful, in the way a thunderstorm or a tiger was beautiful. There was a stillness about him that felt unnatural. Humans fidgeted. They tapped their fingers, checked their mirrors, hummed along to the radio. This man did neither. He was absolute stillness in motion. "You can drop me off at a police station," Alara said softly, breaking the silence. "I don't want to be trouble." "The police," Valerius said, his voice laced with a dark amusement, "are useful for traffic accidents and noise complaints. They are not useful for men like the one who is chasing you." Alara hugged her arms around herself. "You saw him." "I saw a coward," Valerius corrected. "A weak man seeking to assert power over someone smaller. It is a common human failing." "He's not just a coward," Alara murmured, looking down at her hands. "He's connected. His uncle is a precinct captain. That's why I ran." "Nobody listens." Valerius's eyes narrowed slightly in the mirror. "Corruption," he mused. "Another common failing." The car turned off the main road, passing through a set of massive iron gates that swung open automatically at their approach. They drove up a long, winding driveway lined with ancient oak trees that bowed in the wind, their branches scratching at the stormy sky. At the top of the hill stood a house, no, a manor. It was a sprawling structure of dark stone and Gothic arches, looming against the night like a fortress. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. Who are you? Valerius brought the car to a stop in front of the grand entrance. The rain was still pouring, but under the portico, it was dry. He killed the engine. The silence returned, heavier than before. He turned in his seat to look at her fully for the first time. Ilara felt the air leave the car. His face was sharp angles and shadows, but his eyes, they were captivating. They held a depth of intelligence and weariness that made her feel like a child. I am Valerius, he said. And tonight, you are my guest. I can't pay you, she blurted out, the absurdity of the situation hitting her. I have $12 in my bank account. A corner of his mouth ticked up. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. I do not require your money, little bird. He opened his door and stepped out. In seconds, he was at her door, opening it for her. He offered her a hand. Ilara hesitated. She looked at the hand, pale, long-fingered, steady. She looked at the dark manor. She looked back at the road leading down to the city where Mark was waiting. She took his hand. His skin was cool to the touch, smoother than marble. When his fingers closed around hers, she felt a strange sensation, a hum of energy that traveled up her arm and settled in her chest, calming her racing heart. Come, he said. You are shivering. The interior of the manor was vast. The foyer was large enough to fit her entire apartment building inside. A grand staircase swept up to the darkness of the second floor, and a chandelier the size of a small car hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting a warm, golden light that made the polished marble floors gleam. Standing in the center of the hall was a man. He was younger than Valerius, or at least appeared to be, with sandy blonde hair and a face that seemed perpetually ready to smile, though his eyes were sharp and calculating. Valerius, the man said, his eyebrows shooting up as he took in Ilara's soaked uniform and the puddle forming around her sneakers. You went out for a drive to clear your head and returned with a stray? Elias, Valerius said, his tone warning. This is... He paused, realizing he didn't know her name. Ilara, she supplied, her voice small in the massive space. Ilara, Valerius repeated. The name sounded different when he said it, like it had weight. She requires a room. Something warm. And dry clothes. Elias walked closer, his gaze sweeping over Ilara with a mixture of curiosity and concern. He sniffed the air discreetly. She's terrified, he noted quietly to Valerius. And she smells of adrenaline and cheap rain. She was being hunted, Valerius said, shedding his jacket and handing it to a servant who appeared from the shadows as if summoned by thought alone. She is under my protection for the night. Elias's playful expression vanished instantly. He looked at Ilara with new eyes, eyes that assessed threats and logistics. Understood. The East Wing guest suite is prepared. I don't want to impose, Ilara stammered. She felt painfully out of place, a muddy stain on a masterpiece painting. I can just sleep on a couch. Or the floor. Valerius stepped closer to her. He towered over her, but he didn't loom. He was simply there, a solid wall between her and the rest of the world. In this house, Ilara, nobody sleeps on the floor, he said softly. You are safe here. The doors are barred. The gates are sealed. No one enters unless I allow it. Do you understand? She looked up at him. For months, she had lived looking over her shoulder. She had slept with a chair wedged under her doorknob. She had jumped at every shadow. Why? She asked. Why are you helping me? Valerius looked down at her. He remembered the whisper in the car. He's going to kill me. He remembered the fear that wasn't for herself, but the resignation to a fate she thought she couldn't escape. Because, he said, his voice low, I have lived a very long time. And I have grown tired of watching wolves tear apart the lambs. He signaled to a maid who had appeared. Take her. Draw a bath. Burn whatever clothes she is wearing. Hey! Ilara protested weakly. That's my uniform. I will buy you a new one, Valerius said, turning toward the library. One that doesn't smell of fear. The bath was the size of a swimming pool. The water smelled of lavender and eucalyptus. Ilara scrubbed her skin until it was pink, trying to wash away the feeling of the rain and the fear. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a plush robe that was softer than anything she had ever touched, She found a set of clothes waiting for her on the velvet chaise lounge. It wasn't a uniform. It was a pair of silk pajamas in a deep midnight blue. She dressed and walked to the window. The storm was still raging outside, battering against the glass. But inside, it was silent. She should be terrified. She was in a stranger's house, a man who drove a car worth more than her life, surrounded by servants who moved too quietly. But for the first time in months, the knot in her stomach had loosened. She walked to the door of the bedroom and cracked it open. The hallway was dark, lit only by sconces that flickered with what looked like real fire. She heard voices drifting up from downstairs. Reckless, Valerius, the sandy-haired man, Elias, was saying, "You know the council creates rules for a reason. Humans are not pets." "She is not a pet," Valerius's voice replied, deeper, resonating through the stone. "She is a witness." "A witness to what?" "Your sudden development of a conscience." Elias scoffed. "If the court finds out you're harboring a human, a stray with baggage, Silas will have a field day. He's been looking for a crack in your armor for 50 years. "Let him look," Valerius said. "Silas is a vulture circling a lion. He keeps his distance." "This girl brings trouble," Elias insisted. "Her trouble has a name, and likely a police report. If her pursuer has connections, then I will sever them," Valerius said. The capitalization was audible. It sounded final. "I looked into her eyes, Elias. She has fire in her, buried under the ash." "I am intrigued." "Intrigued?" Elias sighed. "The last time you were intrigued, we ended up at war with the Leakin clans of the north." "Go to sleep, Elias." Elara closed the door quietly. Her heart was beating fast again, but not from fear of Mark. Vultures. Lions. Lichens? She crept back to the bed, a massive, four-poster thing with sheets that felt like cool water, and climbed in. She told herself she wouldn't sleep. She would just rest her eyes for a moment, stay alert. But the safety of the room was a drug. Within minutes, the darkness claimed her. She woke to sunlight streaming through the heavy curtains. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then the memory of the rain and the black car rushed back. She sat up. On the bedside table, there was a tray with coffee, fresh fruit, and a single, perfect red rose. There was also a note, written in elegant, sharp script on thick cardstock. "Breakfast is served on the terrace. Do not attempt to leave the grounds. The gates are locked for your protection. V." Elara dressed in the clothes she found in the wardrobe, a simple cashmere sweater and jeans that fit her perfectly, which was disturbing in its own right. She made her way downstairs, following the smell of coffee and the sound of birdsong. She found Valerius on a stone terrace overlooking a sprawling garden. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and vibrant green. He was reading a newspaper, an actual physical newspaper, and drinking a dark red liquid from a crystal goblet. He looked up as she approached. In the daylight, he was even more striking. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and the amber of his eyes was piercing. "Good morning," he said. He didn't smile, but his face was not unkind. "Is that blood?" Elara asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. She froze, horrified at her own rudeness. Valerius paused, the goblet halfway to his lips. He looked at the liquid, then at her. "Pomegranate juice," he said smoothly. "Rich in antioxidants." He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit. Eat." Elara sat. The table was laden with pastries, eggs, fruit. She realized she was starving. She took a croissant, tearing it apart nervously. "I need to go home," she said after a few bites. "I have a shift at the diner at 4. And my cat. I need to feed my cat." "Your cat has been fed," Valerius said, turning a page of his newspaper. "My associates visited your apartment this morning to retrieve some of your belongings. The animal, Mr. Whiskers, I believe, is currently being pampered by the kitchen staff. He seems particularly fond of the salmon." Elara dropped her croissant. "You broke into my apartment?" "We entered securely to ensure your essentials were retrieved," Valerius corrected. "And it is fortunate we did." He folded the newspaper and placed it on the table. His expression hardened. "Your door had been kicked in," he said. "Your apartment was tossed." Whoever was chasing you, he did not stop when you got into my car. He went to your home. Alara felt the blood drain from her face. He was there. He was, Valeria said. And he left a message. He slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a napkin from her kitchen, scrawled with jagged, angry handwriting. You can't hide. I will burn it all down. Alara stared at the words. The letters swam before her eyes. He's never going to stop, she whispered. I have to leave town. Maybe go to the coast. He will find you, Valeria said. Men like him are persistent because they believe they are owed ownership. If you run, he will chase. If you hide, he will hunt. Then what do I do? Alara cried, her voice rising. I can't stay here forever. I'm nobody. I'm just a waitress who made a mistake. You are not nobody, Valeria said. He stood up. He moved so fast that one moment he was sitting, and the next he was standing beside her chair. He placed a hand on her shoulder. His touch was heavy, grounding. You are the woman who sat in the king's carriage and demanded passage, he said softly. You have claimed sanctuary, Alara. And by the ancient laws of my people, once sanctuary is granted, it cannot be revoked until the threat is neutralized. Alara looked up at him. Your people? Who are you, really? Valerius looked out at the garden. A butterfly landed on the stone railing. He watched it with an intensity that made the insect seem to freeze. I am what the stories warn you about, he said. I am the thing in the dark. But for you, I am the shield. Suddenly, a phone rang. Not Alara's broken one, but a sleek device in Valerius's pocket. He pulled it out, looked at the screen, and his eyes narrowed into slits of molten gold. Speak, he answered. He listened for a moment, his face growing colder with every second. The temperature on the terrace seemed to drop 10 degrees. The birds stopped singing. When? Valerius asked. A pause. And he is sure? He hung up the phone. He looked down at Alara. It seems your mark has been busy, Valerius said. He has filed a police report claiming you were kidnapped. And he has tipped off a local journalist that a wealthy predator snatched a helpless girl from the street. Alara gasped. That's a lie. It is a narrative, Valerius said. And narratives have power. But what concerns me is not the police or the press. Then what? The journalist he contacted, Valerius said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. He works for a tabloid that is secretly owned by Lord Silas. My rival. Valerius turned his gaze to Alara, and for the first time, she saw the monster he spoke of. His pupils had dilated until his eyes were almost entirely black. This is no longer just a domestic dispute, little bird, he said. You have become a pawn in a game played by immortals. I don't want to be a pawn, Alara said, standing up to face him. Her legs shook, but she locked her knees. I want my life back. You cannot have your old life back, Valeria said. It is gone. Ashes. He reached out and tilted her chin up with one finger. But if you trust me, he said, I can give you a new one. A life where you never have to run again. But it will require you to be brave. Braver than you have ever been. What do I have to do? She asked. Tonight, Valerius said, the High Council of the Night Court meets. I must present you to them. I must declare you under my protection publicly. If I do not, Silas will use you to destroy me. And if you do? Then every vampire, werewolf, and shade in this city will know your face, Valerius said. And they will know that to touch you is to declare war on the king. He leaned closer, his voice a caress of velvet and steel. The dress was not a garment, it was a manifesto. It lay on the bed like a pool of spilled ink, black velvet that seemed to absorb the afternoon light, trimmed with silver thread that caught the sun like trapped stars. Elias stood beside it, his arms crossed, his usual playful demeanor replaced by the sharp, efficient tension of a soldier preparing a civilian for the front lines. Valerius commissioned this 60 years ago for a queen who never arrived, Elias said, his voice devoid of sentiment. It has been altered to your measurements. It is armored weave. Knife-resistant. Tear-resistant. And it covers your throat. Alara ran a hand over the fabric. It was cool to the touch, heavy with history. Why do I need armor for a meeting? Because the High Council is not a government body, Alara, Elias said, meeting her eyes. It is a shark tank. They will smell your fear. They will smell your mortality. This dress, it says you belong to the night. It is a lie, but it is a necessary one. Alara took a breath, the air shuddering in her lungs. And if they don't believe the lie? Then you stay behind Valerius, Elias said simply. And you pray. Preparation was a blur of silence and hands. Servants, pale, efficient women with eyes that never seemed to blink, bathed her again, scented her skin with oils that smelled of ozone and crushed lilies to mask the scent of her human blood. They painted her lips a deep crimson and pinned her hair up in an intricate weave of braids that exposed the nape of her neck, only to cover it with a heavy silver choker set with obsidian. When she finally looked in the mirror, she didn't recognize the woman staring back. The frightened waitress in the grease-stained apron was gone. In her place stood a creature of shadow and moonlight, her eyes wide and dark, her posture forced straight by the weight of the gown. She looked powerful. She felt like she was made of glass. A knock at the door broke the spell. Valerius entered. He had changed as well. Gone was the modern suit. He wore a formal coat of charcoal wool with a high collar, reminiscent of a bygone century, but tailored with modern precision. At his hip, tucked discreetly beneath the coat, was the hilt of a blade. He stopped 3 paces into the room. The air around him went still. His amber eyes swept over her, taking in the dress, the jewels, the trembling of her hands that she tried to hide in the folds of the velvet. You look. He paused, searching for the word. His gaze lingered on the silver choker at her throat, a mark of ownership, she realized with a jolt. You look like you belong to the darkness. I feel like I'm playing dress-up, Alara whispered. They're going to know. I'm just Alara. I serve coffee. I count tips. Valerius closed the distance between them. He did not touch her, but his proximity was a physical weight, a magnetic field that pulled at her skin. Tonight, you are not Alara the waitress, he said, his voice low and compelling. Tonight, you are the ward of the king. You do not bow. You do not flinch. If they speak to you, you answer with truth, but you offer no apologies. Do you understand? I don't know if I can, she admitted, her voice cracking. You sat in a stranger's car and demanded to be saved while a monster hunted you, Valerius said. You have a survival instinct that rivals any creature in my court. Use it. He offered his arm. It was stiff, formal. The sun is setting. The court gathers. The drive to the city was silent. The rain had returned, a weeping drizzle that slicked the streets with oil and neon reflections. Valerius drove with one hand, his eyes scanning the shadows, his body radiating a tension that made the leather of the car creak. They didn't go to a government building or a hidden castle. They pulled up to the rear entrance of the old Symphony Hall, a massive Beaux-Arts structure that had been under renovation for a decade. Scaffolding skeletonized its facade, but the rear doors were polished brass, guarded by 2 men who looked like bouncers but stood with the stillness of statues. As the car approached, the guards bowed. Deeply. Stay close to me, Valerius murmured as he killed the engine. Do not let go of my arm. Whatever you see, do not scream. Alara nodded, her throat too dry to speak. They exited the car. The guards opened the heavy doors, and a blast of cold, conditioned air hit them, carrying the scent of beeswax, old paper, and something metallic, like a handful of pennies. They walked down a long corridor lined with mirrors that seemed to ripple as they passed. They descended a staircase that spiraled deep into the earth, far below the foundations of the city. The sounds of the street above faded, replaced by a low, thrumming hum, like the vibration of a massive cello string. At the bottom of the stairs, double doors of carved ebony stood closed. Voices drifted through the wood-cultured, polite, dangerous voices. Valerius paused. He placed his hand over hers where it rested on his arm. His skin was ice-cold, but the pressure was grounding. Silas will be there, he said quietly. He will try to provoke you. He will use your fear of Mark against you. He will try to make you look unstable. What do I do? You look at me, Valerius said. Ignore the sharks. Look at the tiger. The doors swung open without being touched. The chamber of the High Council was a cavernous rotunda, lit by thousands of floating candles that hovered in the air, dripping wax that vanished before it hit the floor. In the center of the room sat a circular table of black stone. Around it sat 12 figures. The silence that fell was instantaneous and absolute. 12 pairs of eyes turned to them. Some were red, some gold, some entirely black. They were beautiful and terrible, beings of impossible grace and predatory stillness. And standing near the head of the table, sipping from a delicate flute, was a man who looked like a fallen angel. He had hair like spun gold and a smile that didn't reach his eyes that were a chilling, pale blue. Silas. Valerius, Silas said, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. We were just discussing your extracurricular activities. And look, you've brought show and tell. Valerius walked Alara into the room. He moved with a prowling elegance that made the other vampires shift in their seats. He did not stop until they were at the center of the circle, exposed to every gaze. I bring a petitioner, Valerius announced, his voice booming off the stone walls. And I bring a grievance. A petitioner? An elderly woman with skin like cracked porcelain leaned forward. She smells of mortality, Valerius. She smells of the diner on 4th Street and cheap fear. Since when does the king of the night show for human strays? Since the sanctity of my carriage was breached, Valerius said coolly. And since the laws of sanctuary were invoked. Silas chuckled. He set his glass down with a sharp clink. He walked around the table, circling them like a wolf testing a fence. Sanctuary? Silas asked, raising an eyebrow. For a fugitive? The police reports are quite distressing, Valerius. Kidnapping. Unlawful detention. The girl's family, well, her ex-boyfriend, who claims to speak for her family, is distraught. He's rallying the press. He's calling you a monster. Alara felt Valerius's arm tense beneath her fingers, hard as iron. The man is a hunter, Valerius said. He intends to kill her. You know this, Silas. You funded the tabloid that printed the story. A murmur went through the room. The council members exchanged glances. Political maneuvering was expected. Exposing the court to human scrutiny was a violation. I merely support free press, Silas said, widening his eyes innocently. He stopped in front of Alara. He was close enough that she could smell him, mint and rot, a disturbing combination. Tell me, my dear, Silas said, leaning down. Did he snatch you? Did he mesmerize you with those golden eyes? You can tell us. We are the justice here. We can send you home to your Mark, was it? At the name, Alara flinched. It was involuntary, of a reflex born of 2 years of conditioning. Silas smiled. See? She flinches. She is terrified. Valerius is holding her against her will. She flinches at the name of her abuser. Valerius snarled, the sound ripping through the polite atmosphere like a chainsaw. He stepped between Alara and Silas, breaking the contact. Let her speak, the porcelain-skinned woman commanded. If she is a petitioner, she has a voice. The room fell silent again. All eyes were on Alara. This was it. The moment Valerius had warned her about. She stepped out from behind Valerius. Her legs felt like water, but the weight of the velvet dress held her upright. She thought of Mark's hand on her throat. She thought of the police officer who told her it was a civil matter. She thought of the black car, the only safe place she had found in years. I am not a prisoner, she said. Her voice was small, shaky, but it carried in the acoustic perfection of the chamber. She cleared her throat and lifted her chin, exposing the silver choker. I got into his car because I was running for my life. Mark, he doesn't love me. He owns me. And when I tried to leave, he promised to bury me. She looked directly at Silas. You say you're justice? If you send me back to him, you aren't sending me home. You're sending me to a morgue. Silas's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Dramatic, he scoffed. Humans are so fragile. Enough, Valerius commanded. He turned to the council. The human authorities are compromised. The hunter is relentless. If I turn her out, she dies. And the night court does not bow to the whims of human bullies. So you keep her? A man with scars across his face asked. As what? A pet? A blood bag? No, Valerius said. He turned to Alara. He took her left hand in his. He raised it for the room to see. "I claim her," Valerius declared. The words seemed to vibrate in the floorboards. "By the right of Aeterna Custodia. She is under my personal protection. Her blood is my blood. Her breath is my breath. To harm her is to strike the king." The room erupted. Figures stood up, chairs scraping against stone. "You cannot," Silas shouted, his composure shattering. "The Custodia is for consorts. For heirs. Not for cattle. It is done." Valerius roared. His voice was no longer human. It was the sound of a tectonic plate shifting. He bit into his own wrist. A bead of dark, rich blood welled up. He pressed his thumb to the wound, then pressed his thumb against Alara's forehead, just between her eyes. She gasped. The blood didn't feel wet. It felt hot, like a brand. A pulse of energy shot through her skull, down her spine. For a second, she saw the room not as a dark chamber, but as a web of glowing lines, the life force of every being in the room. She felt Valerius's heartbeat in her own chest, steady and furious. "She is marked," Valerius hissed, turning to Silas. His eyes were bleeding darkness, the whites gone. "Touch her, Silas, and I will tear your house down stone by stone." Silas stared at the red mark fading into Alara's skin. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. But he stepped back. "You have made a mistake, Valerius," Silas whispered, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "You have bound your life to a mayfly. When she breaks, and she will break, you will shatter with her." "We are leaving," Valerius said. He swept Alara toward the door. The council members parted like the Red Sea, none daring to cross the path of a king who had just invoked the old magic. They didn't speak until they were back in the car, speeding away from the city, back toward the safety of the hills. Alara touched her forehead. The skin felt tender, but the heat was fading. "What did you do to me?" she asked softly. Valerius gripped the wheel, his knuckles white. He looked exhausted, as if the magic had drained him. "I gave you a shield," he said hoarsely. "Anyone of my kind who looks at you now will see my mark. They will know that if they hurt you, I will know instantly. And I will come for them." "And the human world?" Alara asked. "Does it work on them?" "No," Valerius said. "Mark cannot see it. But Silas. Silas will go to Mark now. He will use him as a weapon because he cannot touch you himself." "So it's not over," she said, staring out at the rain. "It has just begun," Valerius replied. "Silas is right about one thing. I have broken a sacred tradition. The council will not support me if this goes wrong. We are alone." Alara looked at his profile. He looked solitary, ancient, and burdened. "You're not alone," she said. Valerius glanced at her. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "No," he agreed softly. "I suppose I am not." The manor was no longer just a sanctuary, it was a fortress preparing for siege. Alara learned quickly that being under protection meant work. She was not allowed to sit idle. Elias took charge of her schedule. "If you are to be the ward of the king, you must know the history," Elias said, dropping a leather-bound book the size of a microwave onto the library table in front of her. Dust motes danced in the morning light. "Is there a test?" Alara asked, eyeing the book warily. "The Treaties of the Crimson Pact, 1400 to 1900. The test is survival," Elias chirped. "Valerius has enemies who have been plotting his downfall since before electricity was invented. You need to know who smiles to your face while holding a dagger behind their back." Alara opened the book. "Like Silas." "Silas is a problem," Elias agreed, pacing the room. "But he's a political problem. The immediate problem is the noise." "The noise." "The media," Elias said, gesturing to a tablet on the table. Alara looked at the screen. It was a live stream from a local news channel. A reporter was standing in front of the gates of Valerius's manor. Police are still waiting for a warrant to enter the premises of reclusive billionaire Valerius Blackwood. The family of the missing woman, Alara Vance, has pleaded for her return. "We have a statement from her boyfriend, Mark." The camera cut to Mark. He looked terrible, unshaven, red-eyed, wearing a crumpled shirt. He looked like the grieving, desperate lover. "I just want her back," Mark sobbed into the microphones. "She's confused. She's sick. This man, he brainwashed her." Alara, if you're watching this, I love you. Just come home. Alara felt bile rise in her throat. He's acting, she spat. He put on a show. That's what he does. He breaks my ribs and then cries and says he can't live without me. The world loves a tragedy, a deep voice said from the doorway. Valerius entered. He had discarded the formal wear for a dark turtleneck and trousers, looking more like a modern architect than an ancient king, though the way he moved, silent, fluid, betrayed him. They're gathering at the gates, Valerius said. Protesters. Reporters. Silas has stirred the hive. I can go out there, Alara said, standing up. I can tell them the truth. They won't believe you, Valerius said gently. They will say I drugged you. They will say it's Stockholm Syndrome. Mark has controlled the narrative too well. He walked to the window, looking down at the distant gates where tiny figures held signs. We need to break his hold on your credibility, Valerius said. We need proof of what he is. He's careful, Alara said, hugging her arms. He never hits me where it shows. He never writes threats down, except that note in my apartment. The note is a start, Valerius said. But we need more. We need to go into the lion's den. He turned to her. Where does he keep his secrets, Alara? Every abuser keeps trophies. Records. Insurance. Alara closed her eyes, thinking. Mark was paranoid. He didn't trust the cloud. He didn't trust banks. There's a safe, she whispered. In his uncle's garage. He keeps a box there. He told me once. He said if I ever tried to leave, he had photos. Things he took when I was sleeping. Things that would ruin me. Valerius's eyes flashed with a cold, terrifying light. Blackmail. He keeps cash there too, she added. Payoffs. From his uncles, side businesses. Evidence of corruption, Elias said, perking up. That we can use. If we expose his uncle, the police protection vanishes. Mark becomes just another thug. But we can't get it, Alara said. His uncle is a precinct captain. The house is watched. And Mark is probably staying there now. We cannot enter, Valerius agreed. The threshold laws prevent me from entering a human home uninvited. And Elias is allergic to guard dogs. Hey, Elias protested. However, Valerius continued, his gaze locking onto Alara. You are human. The laws of entry do not apply to you. Alara's blood ran cold. You want me to go back? I want you to infiltrate, Valerius said. Not alone. Never alone. I will be the shadow at your back. I will be the wind in the trees. But you must be the one to open the door. It's a trap, Alara whispered. Silas will expect it. Yes, Valerius said. He will. That is why we must offer him a distraction. The plan was madness. It relied on timing, magic, and Alara's ability to keep her heart rate under control while standing 10 feet away from the man who wanted to kill her. Night had fallen. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the city scoured and slick. Valerius drove a different car this time, a nondescript sedan that blended into the shadows. He parked 2 blocks away from the uncle's house in a quiet, suburban neighborhood that smelled of wet grass and complacency. Listen to me, Valerius said, turning to Alara in the passenger seat. He reached out and touched the silver choker she still wore. This amulet connects us. If you are in danger, true, immediate danger, press your hand to it and call my name. I will hear you. I will be there before your heart beats twice. And the distraction? Alara asked, checking the small earpiece Elias had given her. Elias is taking care of it, Valerius said with a dry note in his voice. Suddenly, 3 blocks away, a massive explosion of fireworks erupted into the night sky. Red, gold, and green sparks showered down over the police precinct, followed by the sound of every car alarm in a 3-mile radius going off simultaneously. Subtle, Alara muttered. Go, Valerius commanded. I will watch the perimeter. Alara slipped out of the car. She was dressed in black, moving through the shadows of the hedges. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but strangely, beneath the fear, there was a cold, hard line of determination. You are the ward of the king, she told herself. You do not bow. She reached the side of the garage. It was a detached structure, old and peeling. She knew the keypad code. Mark had used her birthday, a twisted way of claiming ownership even over the lock. She punched in the numbers. 0-9-1-8. The light turned green. The door creaked open. She slipped inside. The garage smelled of motor oil and sawdust. She clicked on the small flashlight Elias had given her. There it was. The floor safe, hidden under a stack of old tires. She shoved the tires aside, grunting with the effort. She knelt down, her fingers trembling over the dial. She knew this combination too. Mark was lazy with numbers. It was his own birthday. Click, click, click. The safe popped open. Elara let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She reached in. There was the box. A metal lockbox. She grabbed it. It was heavy. Found it, she whispered into the calms. Get out, Valerius's voice came back, sharp and urgent. Now. Someone is coming. Elara scrambled up, clutching the box to her chest. She turned to the door. A figure blocked the exit. It wasn't Mark. It was Silas. He was leaning against the door frame, looking effortlessly chic in a trench coat, holding a silenced pistol loosely in one hand. Not a magical weapon. A human one. Predictable, Silas sighed. Valerius always relies on the frontal assault. He lacks finesse. Elara froze. She backed up until she hit the workbench. You can't touch me, she said, her voice shaking but defiant. I have the king's mark. I know, Silas said, stepping into the garage. The moonlight caught the silver of the gun. That's why I'm not going to touch you, Elara. I'm going to shoot you. A bullet is a mechanical object. No magic involved. Just physics. He raised the gun. And when Valerius comes to mourn over your body, Silas smiled, his fangs glinting, my associates will be waiting with chains made of consecrated iron. You are the bait, darling. You always were. Elara's hand flew to her throat. She gripped the choker. Valerius, she screamed. Silas pulled the trigger. Phut. The sound was ridiculously quiet. Elara flinched, waiting for the pain, waiting for the darkness. But the bullet never hit her. A shadow materialized in front of her. Not a man, but a wall of darkness that solidified instantly into flesh and coat. Valerius stood before her, his back to her. He hadn't just arrived. He had teleported, shattering the air with a sound like a thunderclap that shook the tools on the walls. He caught the bullet. He didn't catch it with his hand. He caught it with the air itself, freezing the projectile inches from his chest. It hung there, spinning lazily, suspended in a field of golden force. Valerius looked at Silas. His face was not angry. It was something far worse. It was blank. You used a gun, Valerius said softly. How pedestrian. Silas's eyes went wide. He fired again. And again. Valerius walked forward. The bullets hit his aura and dissolved into lead dust. You threatened what is mine, Valerius said. He moved. It was too fast to see. One moment he was 5 feet away, the next his hand was wrapped around Silas's throat, lifting the other vampire 3 feet off the ground. Silas clawed at Valerius's arm, his legs kicking. Trap. Silas choked out. Ambush. Where? Valerius asked calmly. Suddenly, the garage walls exploded inward. It wasn't a bomb. It was wolves. For massive shapes, formatted and eyes glowing yellow, crashed through the rotting wood. Lycans. Mercenaries. Valerius threw Silas into the workbench, shattering it, and spun to face the new threat. Elara, get behind me, he roared. A wolf the size of a pony lunged. Valerius backhanded it with enough force to crack its skull, sending it flying out into the yard. But 2 more were on him instantly, snapping at his arms, trying to drag him down. The 4th wolf didn't attack Valerius. It looked at Elara. It snarled, saliva dripping from jaws that could crush a bowling ball. It crouched to spring. Elara had nowhere to run. She held the metal box like a shield, knowing it was useless. Use your instincts, Valerius had said. The wolf leaped. Elara didn't scream. She dropped to the floor, rolling forward under the arc of the leap. As the wolf passed over her, She swung the heavy metal box upward with all her strength. Crack! The corner of the box connected with the wolf's sensitive underbelly. The beast yelped, a high-pitched sound, and crashed into the tires, winded. It wasn't a kill, but it was a distraction. Valerius saw it. He saw her fight. A roar tore from his throat, a sound of pure, triumphant pride mixed with fury. He unleashed his power. A shockwave of darkness exploded from his body, throwing the remaining wolves backward as if they had been hit by a truck. He grabbed Alara's arm. Run! They burst out of the shattered garage into the night. The alarm was still blaring. Sirens were wailing in the distance, real police this time. The car! Valerius shouted, pulling her toward the alley. They reached the sedan just as blue and red lights flooded the street. Valerius threw her into the passenger seat and slid behind the wheel. He gunned the engine, and the car screeched away, tires smoking, leaving the chaos behind. Alara sat trembling, clutching the dented metal box to her chest. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Valerius reached over. His hand covered hers on the box. His hand was shaking too. You fought, he said, glancing at her with an intensity that burned. A Leakin lunged at you and you fought. I hit it in the balls, Alara whispered, a hysterical giggle bubbling up. Valerius threw his head back and laughed. It was a rusty, deep sound, as if he hadn't used it in decades. Remind me, he said, grinning at her, his fangs visible and sharp. Never to make you angry, Alara. Alara looked at him. He was covered in dust, his coat was torn, and he looked terrifying. But in that moment, she didn't see a monster. She saw the only person in the world who was on her side. We got the box, she said, lifting it up. Yes, Valerius said, his eyes returning to the road, the smile lingering. We have the evidence. We have the leverage. His expression darkened. And now we go to war. The drive back to the manor was not the smooth, silent glide of their first journey. Valerius drove like a man possessed, the sedan tearing around corners with calculated violence. His hands were gripping the wheel so tightly the leather groaned, and a sheen of sweat, painful, unnatural sweat, glistened on his pale forehead. You're hurt, Alara said, her voice tight. She could smell it now. Under the scent of rain and ozone, there was the copper tang of blood. His blood. It is a scratch, Valerius gritted out, his jaw locked. We are nearly there. A scratch doesn't make the king of the night court sweat, Alara countered, her fear for herself replaced by a terrifying new fear for him. She reached out, hovering her hand over his arm. The sleeve of his coat was shredded, soaked in a dark, viscous liquid. Leakin claws, Valerius admitted, his voice straining. They carry a venom. It slows the regeneration. It burns. He swerved the car through the manor gates, which swung open just in time, and skidded to a halt in the courtyard. Elias was already running down the steps, his face pale. I heard the howl, Elias said, wrenching the driver's door open. How many? 4, Valerius said, stumbling as he stepped out. He leaned heavily against the car door, his legendary grace faltering. Mercenaries. Northern clan. Elias cursed, a string of ancient words that sounded like cracking ice. Get him inside. The venom works fast. Together, they supported him. Alara took his left side, wrapping her arm around his waist. He felt solid, heavy as a statue, but burning up. For a creature of the cold, the heat radiating from him was terrifying. I can walk, Valerius growled, though he leaned into her. Shut up and walk, Alara said. They bypassed the grand foyer and went straight to a lower level, into a room that looked like a cross between a surgical suite and an alchemy lab. Elias swept a pile of scrolls off a steel table. Sit, Elias commanded. Valerius sat, his breath coming in ragged hitches. He stripped off his ruined coat and the shirt beneath. Alara gasped. 3 deep, jagged gashes ran from his shoulder to his ribs. The edges of the wounds were black and bubbling, the flesh refusing to knit together. I need silver nitrate and wolfsbane, Elias said, rummaging through a cabinet. Alara, get me the blue bottle on the top shelf. And clean towels. Lots of them. Alara moved. She didn't think about the blood, or the impossible anatomy of the man on the table. She grabbed the bottle. She grabbed the towels. "This is going to hurt," Elias warned, uncorking the blue bottle. "Do it," Valeria said, gripping the edge of the table. Elias poured the liquid over the wounds. Valerius threw his head back and let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream, but a low, guttural roar of agony that shook the glass jars on the shelves. His back arched, muscles roping tight as steel cables. Alara didn't look away. She stepped forward, grabbing his hand. "Look at me," she commanded, squeezing his fingers. "Valerius, look at me." His eyes snapped to hers. The amber was swirling with black, his pupils blown wide with pain. He squeezed her hand back, hard enough to bruise, but she didn't pull away. "Breathe," she whispered. "Just breathe." Slowly, the bubbling stopped. The black edges of the wound turned a clean, angry red. The tension left his frame, leaving him slumped and panting. Elias exhaled, wiping his brow. "The venom is neutralized. You'll heal now. But it will take hours. You are vulnerable, my friend." Valerius looked at his hand, still gripping Alara's. He looked at her face, pale but determined, her eyes locked on his. "I am not vulnerable," he rasped, lifting her hand to his lips and pressing a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture of reverence, not romance. "I have a shield." Alara felt a flush rise in her cheeks, but she didn't pull her hand away. "You saved me," she said softly. "You caught a bullet. And you kicked a werewolf in the soft parts," Elias noted, a grin breaking through his worry as he began bandaging the wound. "I would have paid good money to see that." "The box," Valerius said, trying to sit up straighter. "Where's the box?" They moved to the library. Valerius refused to rest, settling for a stiff drink of that dark red liquid, which Alara now knew was fortified blood, and a velvet armchair near the fire. Alara placed the dented metal box on the heavy oak table. It looked small, insignificant. A rusty lockbox from a dusty garage. "Do you have the key?" Elias asked. "No," Alara said. "Mark kept it on his keychain." "Allow me," Valerius said. He didn't stand. He simply flicked his wrist. The metal lock twisted, groaned, and snapped with a sharp ping. Alara lifted the lid. Inside, there were stacks of cash, dirty, rubber-banded rolls of 20s and 100s. There were photos, just as she feared. Photos of her sleeping. Photos of her walking to work. Evidence of a sick obsession. She swept them aside, refusing to let them hurt her. Beneath the photos was a black ledger and a flash drive. Elias picked up the ledger. He flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the columns of numbers and dates. "This isn't just illegal gambling," Elias murmured. "This is transport logs." "Transport of what?" Alara asked. "Red cargo," Elias read. "Origin, Eastern Europe. Destination, the docks, warehouse 4. Buyer, S. Valerius set his glass down. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. Silas. "Mark's uncle wasn't just hiding domestic abuse," Valerius said, his voice cold. "He was using his police precinct to facilitate the trafficking of human blood. Unsanctioned blood. From unregistered donors." Alara felt sick. "People? Like, kidnapping people?" "Sometimes," Valerius said grimly. "Or paying the desperate. It is a violation of the Crimson Pact. We do not farm humans. It causes disease. It causes exposure. If the council knew Silas was running a blood cartel, they would execute him," Elias finished. "Instantly. This is treason against our kind." "But wait," Alara said, picking up a piece of paper tucked into the back of the ledger. "Look at this." It was an email printout. From an encrypted address to Mark's uncle. Subject, the loose end. Body, the girl knows too much about the garage. If she leaves, she becomes a liability. Secure her. If you cannot secure her, erase her. The project is too close to completion to risk a leak. S. Alara stared at the paper. Her hands shook. "He didn't want me back because he loved me," she whispered, the realization crashing over her like icy water. "He wanted me back because I knew where the safe was. I knew the code." She laughed, a brittle, broken sound. I thought. I thought I was just a victim of a bad relationship. But I was just a loose end in a corporate merger. Valerius stood up. He ignored the pain in his side. He crossed the room and took the paper from her hand. No, he said firmly. You were never just a loose end. You were the anomaly. You were the one variable they couldn't calculate. He turned the paper over, looking at the date. This proves Silas ordered a hit on a human, Valerius said. Coupled with the trafficking, this destroys him. We have the weapon. We have to take this to the council, Elias said, grabbing the ledger. Tonight. We call an emergency session. We can't, Valerius said. He walked to the window and pulled back the heavy curtain. Look. Alara joined him. Down below, at the main gates, the scene had changed. The protesters were gone. The news vans were gone. In their place stood a line of figures dressed in black armor that seemed to absorb the moonlight. They stood perfectly still, a silent army blocking the exit. The night guard, Elias whispered, all the color draining from his face. The council's personal enforcers. Silas moved faster, Valerius said. He must have spun the story of the garage. He claimed I attacked a human residence. He claimed I broke the peace. A voice boomed from the darkness outside, amplified by magic so that it permeated the walls of the manor. Valerius Blackwood. By order of the High Council, you are stripped of your rank. You are charged with sedition, breaking the peace, and consorting with rogue lichens. Surrender the human girl, and you will be granted a trial. Resist, and you will be dust. Alara stepped back from the window. They're here for me. They are here for power, Valerius corrected. You are just the excuse. He turned to Elias. Seal the house. Activate the wards. No one gets in. Valerius, Elias said, his voice trembling. That is the night guard. There are 50 of them. And we are 2 vampires and a human with a metal box. Then we have them outnumbered, Valerius said, a reckless, dangerous smile curving his lips. Seal the house. The manor was in lockdown. Heavy steel shutters had slammed down over every window. Ancient runes etched into the foundation glowed with a faint, pulsing blue light, creating a dome of magical protection over the estate. Outside, the night guard battered against the wards. Every blow sounded like thunder, shaking the dust from the chandeliers. Alara sat on the floor of the library, the ledger in her lap. She felt useless. A liability. Valerius was pacing, checking the perimeter defenses. He had changed into a tactical vest over a fresh shirt, bristling with weapons, daggers, silver stakes, things she didn't have names for. He stopped when he saw her. The manic energy left him, replaced by a profound, heavy sadness. He knelt in front of her. There is a tunnel, he said softly. Alara looked up. What? Beneath the wine cellar, Valerius said. It leads to the old aqueducts. It comes out 3 miles south, near the train station. Elias has a car waiting there. A bag with cash. Identity papers. He reached out and touched her cheek. His hand was warm now, the healing almost complete. You can go, he said. Take the ledger. Take the evidence to the press, or burn it and disappear. If you leave now, they won't know. They are focused on me. And what happens to you? Alara asked. I will hold them off, Valerius said. I will buy you time. You'll die, she said flatly. I am hard to kill, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. But if you stay, if the wards fail, Silas will not be merciful. Alara looked at the ledger. She looked at the man who had pulled her from the rain, who had stood between her and a bullet, who had declared war on his own kind just because she had asked for help. She thought of running. It was what she was good at. She had run from Mark. She had run from her parents. She had run from every hard thing in her life. But running hadn't saved her. He had saved her. She closed the ledger with a snap. No, she said. Valerius blinked. Alara, be reasonable. This is not your fight. It is my fight, she said, her voice rising. Mark is my monster. Silas is my nightmare. You stepped into my world to save me. I'm not leaving you to face yours alone. She grabbed his hand, the one that had held hers while he burned. Besides, she added, her voice trembling slightly, you said I was under your protection. Aeterna Custodia. That means forever, right? You don't get to fire me just because it got hard. Valerius stared at her. For a moment, the ancient mask crumbled completely. He looked at her with naked wonder, as if she were the only source of light in a universe of dark matter. You are. He started, then shook his head. You are foolish. And stubborn. I'm learning from the best, she retorted. A massive boom shook the house. Plaster rained down from the ceiling. The first ward has fallen, Elias shouted from the hallway. They're bringing up a battering ram. A magic one. Valerius stood up, pulling Alara with him. The tenderness vanished, replaced by the general. If we stay, we fight, he said. No more running. I don't have a weapon, Alara said. Valerius walked to a display case on the wall. He smashed the glass with his elbow and pulled out a long, slender dagger. The blade was obsidian, the handle wrapped in white leather. This is Fongbreaker, he said, handing it to her. It is made of volcanic glass and dipped in holy water. It will cut through vampire skin like paper. He pressed it into her hand. Do not hesitate. If they come close, you strike. What about you? I am going to open the front door, Valerius said. Alara's eyes went wide. What? They expect a siege, Valerius said, his eyes glowing with that predatory gold light. They expect us to cower behind the walls until we starve. I intend to disappoint them. He turned to Elias, who had run into the room carrying a shotgun loaded with incendiary rounds. Elias, are you ready? I hate Tuesdays, Elias grumbled, cocking the shotgun. But yes. Let's make a mess. The heavy oak doors of the manor swung open. The night guard, clustered around a glowing battering ram, froze. They hadn't expected the target to invite them in. Valerius stepped out onto the porch. He stood alone, illuminated by the floodlights of the enemy. He held no weapon in his hands. He simply stood there, hands clasped behind his back, looking like a disappointed schoolmaster facing a row of unruly children. Evening, gentlemen, Valerius projected, his voice calm. You are trespassing. The captain of the guard, a brute of a vampire in heavy plate armor, stepped forward. Surrender, traitor. By order of Lord Silas. Silas is a criminal, Valerius interrupted. And you are his accomplices. Fire, the captain roared. 20 crossbows leveled at Valerius. 20 bolts tipped with silver and ash flew through the air. Valerius didn't move. Just as the bolts were about to strike, a wall of wind, impossible, hurricane-force wind, erupted from the open door behind him. The bolts were swatted aside like flies, clattering harmlessly against the stone pillars. Elias stepped out, holding a staff that glowed with purple energy. Wind shear, he called out cheerfully. Terrible for the hairstyle, great for projectile dysfunction. Valerius moved. He didn't run. He blurred. He was in the middle of the guard before they could reload. He moved like a dancer, a blur of motion that resulted in bodies flying through the air. He didn't kill, he incapacitated. A broken arm here, a shattered knee there. He was dismantling them with surgical precision. But there were too many. Flank him, the captain screamed. Get to the door. Get the girl. 5 guards broke away from the melee and charged up the steps. Elias blasted 2 of them back with his staff, but a third tackled him, sending them both crashing into a flower bed. The remaining 2 guards sprinted for the open door. Alara was waiting in the foyer. She saw them coming, blurring shapes of teeth and malice. She raised the obsidian dagger. Her hands were shaking, but her feet were planted. The first guard burst through the door, his eyes scanning for prey. He saw her. He laughed. Here, little piggy, he snarled. He lunged. Alara didn't try to overpower him. She dropped. She dropped to her knees and slid across the polished marble floor, slashing upward with the dagger as she passed him. The blade sliced through his thigh armor and into the femoral artery. The guard howled, collapsing as his leg gave out. The second guard was right behind him. He didn't pause. He backhanded Alara, a blow that felt like being hit by a car. She flew backward, slamming into the grand staircase. The dagger skittered across the floor. Her vision swam. Pain exploded in her ribs. The guard loomed over her, grabbing her by the hair. He hauled her up, baring his fangs. Valerius is going to watch you bleed out, the guard hissed. Alara couldn't reach the dagger. She couldn't fight his strength. But she remembered the car. She remembered the heat of the blood mark. If you are in danger, call my name. She gripped the silver choker. She closed her eyes. She didn't scream it with her voice, she screamed it with her soul. Valerius. Outside on the lawn, Valerius froze mid-punch. His head snapped toward the house. A sound tore from his throat that stopped the battle entirely. It wasn't a roar. It was a shriek of pure, unadulterated rage. The guard holding Alara raised his hand to strike her again. The front door didn't just open, the entire frame exploded. Splinters of wood and stone turned into shrapnel. Valerius was there. He didn't look human anymore. His face was distorted, his fangs fully extended, his skin glowing with a terrifying red aura. He crossed the foyer in a heartbeat. He grabbed the guard by the back of the neck. He didn't throw him. He didn't punch him. He slammed the guard into the marble floor with such force that a crater appeared in the stone. The guard went limp instantly. Valerius stood over Alara, his chest heaving. He was covered in blood, some his, mostly others. He looked like a demon from the deepest pit of hell. He turned to her. His eyes were black pits. Alara flinched. For a second, she was afraid of him. Valerius saw the flinch. It broke him. The black receded, the amber returning, filled with panic. Alara, he gasped, dropping to his knees. I didn't. He reached for her, then pulled his hand back, seeing the blood on his fingers. I'm okay, she wheezed, sitting up. I'm okay. You came. Always, he whispered. Valerius. Elias's voice shouted from the doorway. He was limping, his clothes torn. They're falling back. But look. Valerius stood and helped Alara up. They looked out the shattered door. The night guard was retreating, dragging their wounded. But they weren't leaving because they were beaten. They were leaving because someone else had arrived. A limousine, long and white, was driving up the driveway, flanked by motorcycles. It flew a flag, a crest of a silver dragon. The arbiter, Valerius said, his voice hollow. Who? Alara asked. The judge, Valerius said. The highest authority in our world. He only comes when a death warrant is to be signed. The limousine stopped. A man stepped out. He was old, impossibly old, leaning on a cane made of white bone. He wore a suit of pure white. He walked to the bottom of the steps. He looked at the carnage. He looked at Valerius. Valerius Blackwood, the arbiter said. His voice was whisper-soft, yet it drowned out the wind. You have made a mess. I was defending my home, Valerius said, stepping in front of Alara. You were harboring a human fugitive, the arbiter said. And you have spilled the blood of the guard. The council demands your head. The council is corrupt. Alara shouted, stepping out from behind Valerius. She held up the ledger. Silas is the criminal. We have proof. The arbiter looked at her. His eyes were colorless, like milk. Proof, he asked. Approaching the arbiter is death for a mortal. Do you wish to test this law, child? If it saves him, Alara said, her voice shaking but loud. Yes. The arbiter paused. He tilted his head. Interesting, he murmured. Valerius, you have chosen a chaotic little creature. He tapped his cane on the ground. Very well. I grant a hearing. Immediate. In the high chamber. He looked at the night guard. Stand down. He looked back at Valerius. Bring your proof. Bring your human. But know this, Valerius. If her proof is insufficient, I will not just kill you. I will let Silas have you both. Valerius bowed his head stiffly. Accepted. The arbiter got back into his car. The white limo turned and drove away. Valerius turned to Alara. He looked exhausted, battered, and terrifyingly proud. Well, he said, wiping blood from his cheek. You wanted to see the council again. It seems you got your wish. Are you ready? She asked him. Valerius took her hand. His grip was iron. With you, he said. I am ready for anything. The silence in the car was heavier than the storm that had started this entire nightmare. Valerius drove the battered sedan with a terrifying precision, his profile etched in stone and shadow. He was still wearing the tactical vest, stained with the blood of the night guard, and his healing wounds were stiff, causing him to grimace with every sharp turn. Ilara sat in the passenger seat, the black ledger clutching to her chest like a holy relic. She looked at her reflection in the side mirror. Her hair was a disaster of tangles and drywall dust, her lip was split, and a bruise was blooming across her cheekbone where the guard had struck her. She looked like a victim. But she didn't feel like one. Not anymore. "You are thinking too loud," Valerius said, his voice rough. He didn't take his eyes off the road. "I'm thinking about Mark," Ilara admitted. "Silas will have him there. To testify." "He will," Valerius agreed. "He will try to make you look small. He will try to make you remember the fear." "I remember the fear," Ilara said, looking down at the silver choker around her neck. "But I also remember you catching a bullet. I remember the wolves. I remember the look on that guard's face when I cut him." She turned to Valerius. "I'm not the same girl who got in your car 3 days ago." Valerius reached across the console. He didn't look at her, but his hand found hers, enveloping it completely. His skin was cool, a stark contrast to the fever heat of the battle. "No," he said softly. "You are not. You are something entirely new. Something the council has never seen." He squeezed her hand. "When we walk in there," he instructed, "do not look at Mark. Do not look at Silas. Keep your eyes on the Arbiter. He is the only thing that matters. He respects strength. If you waver, he will let the wolves eat you. If you stand tall, he might just let us live. And if he doesn't?" Valerius glanced at her then. His amber eyes burned with a fierce, possessive light. "Then I will burn the chamber down with everyone inside," he said simply. "And we will run until the end of the world." The High Council chamber was different this time. The floating candles were extinguished, replaced by harsh, cold columns of white light that shone down from the domed ceiling. The atmosphere was sterile, clinical, an operating theater for justice. The 12 seats of the council were occupied, but the members looked uneasy. They shifted in their stone chairs, whispering to one another. At the head of the room, on a raised dais that hadn't been there before, sat the Arbiter. He looked ancient, his skin like parchment stretched over bone, his white suit glowing under the lights. He sat with his hands resting on the head of his cane, his milky eyes staring at nothing and everything. Silas stood to the left. He was pristine, wearing a suit of midnight blue silk, looking every inch the aristocrat. Behind him stood a man in a cheap windbreaker, looking around the room with wide, terrified, and greedy eyes. Mark. Ilara felt a jolt in her stomach, a physical blow of nausea. But then she felt the heat of the mark on her forehead and the solid presence of Valerius at her right shoulder. "The accused is present," the Arbiter whispered. His voice filled the room without amplification. Valerius walked forward, his boots echoing on the stone. He did not bow. He stood with his chin high, his bloody clothes a badge of defiance. Ilara stood beside him, mimicking his posture. "Valerius Blackwood," the Arbiter said. "You stand charged with sedition, violation of the peace, and harboring a fugitive. How do you plead?" "I plead necessity," Valerius said calm. "And I plead justice." Silas scoffed, a sharp sound in the quiet room. "Justice? You slaughtered my guards. You broke the treaty. Your guards attacked my home," Valerius countered. "While I was under the protection of Aeterna Custodia. A protection granted to a human criminal." Silas shouted, gesturing to Mark. "We have the witness here. The victim of your ward's instability." The Arbiter turned his head slowly toward Mark. "Speak, human." Mark stepped forward. He looked at Ilara, and for a second, she saw the old sneer, the look that used to make her freeze. "She's sick," Mark said, his voice trembling with feigned emotion. "She's been off her meds. She hallucinates. She told me monsters were chasing her. I tried to help her. I tried to bring her home. And then he took her." Mark pointed a shaking finger at Valerius. "He brainwashed her. Look at her. She's bruised. She's beaten. He did that to her." The council murmured. The narrative was compelling. A poor human girl, snatched by a predator, deluded into thinking she was safe. "Ilara," Silas said smoothly. "Tell the truth. Did Valerius Blackwood inflict those injuries upon you? Alara stepped forward. She felt the eyes of every immortal in the room on her. She felt the weight of centuries of prejudice. No, she said clearly. She pointed at Mark. You did. Mark recoiled, his face twisting. Baby, don't lie. The bruises on my ribs are from 3 weeks ago, Alara continued, her voice gaining strength. When you kicked me because I forgot to buy milk. The bruise on my cheek is from tonight, from a guard you sent, Silas. She turned to the arbiter. Mark isn't a victim, she said. He's a conspirator. And I have the proof. She lifted the black ledger. Silas froze. His eyes went to the book, and for the first time, the mask of arrogance slipped, revealing pure, unadulterated panic. That is stolen property. Silas shrieked. She robbed a private residence. This is inadmissible. In the court of night, the arbiter said softly, there is no fruit of the poisonous tree. Evidence is evidence. He extended a hand. The ledger flew from Alara's grasp, floating through the air to land in the arbiter's skeletal palm. The room went deathly silent. The arbiter opened the book. He flipped a page, then another. His expression did not change, but the temperature in the room plummeted. Frost began to creep up the walls. Red cargo, the arbiter read. Batch 404. Origin: St. Jude's homeless shelter. Status: harvested. He looked up. His milky eyes were suddenly swirling with a vortex of gray storms. You have been farming humans, Silas, the arbiter said. The whisper was gone. His voice was the sound of a glacier cracking. You have been trafficking in unsanctioned blood. You have risked the exposure of our entire race for profit. Silas stumbled back. It is a forgery. Valerius planted it. There is an email, Alara said, her voice cutting through Silas's stammering. From you. Ordering Mark's uncle to erase me because I knew about the safe. You signed it. The arbiter turned the page. He found the printout. He looked at Silas. High treason, the arbiter pronounced. Silas's face contorted. The beauty vanished, replaced by the visage of a cornered rat. I did what I had to do. Silas screamed. The council is weak. We are apex predators, and we hide in the shadows eating rats while they rule the world. I was building an army. I was going to give us back the night. You have no army, Valerius said, stepping forward. You have only greed. Silas looked at Valerius, then at Alara. A look of pure, venomous hatred crossed his face. If I go down, Silas hissed, I take your pet with me. It happened in slow motion. Silas reached into his jacket. Not for a weapon, but for a small glass vial filled with a glowing green liquid. Sunfire. Elias shouted from the entrance. Silas threw the vial. Not at Valerius. At Alara. Valerius moved. But he was injured, his speed dampened by the healing wounds. He wouldn't make it. Alara didn't flinch. She didn't cower. She raised her hand, the hand Valerius had kissed, the hand that had held the box. Use your instincts. She didn't know magic. She didn't have speed. But she had the mark. The connection. She shoved her palm forward and screamed one word. Stop. The air in front of her shimmered. The blood connection between her and Valerius flared, drawing on his immense power, channeling it through her mortal frame. A shield of golden energy, translucent and wavering, erupted from her hand. The vial hit the shield. Shatter. The green liquid exploded, hissing and burning against the barrier, but not a drop touched her. The room gasped. Even the arbiter raised an eyebrow. Valerius skidded to a halt beside her, his eyes wide. You. Alara lowered her hand. She was trembling, drained, but alive. I told you, she whispered. I'm not leaving you. Silas stared at the dissipating shield, horror dawning on him. She wields the king's power? She shares it, Valerius said. He turned to Silas, and this time, there was no mercy in his eyes. You tried to burn her. The arbiter stood up. He tapped his cane once. The floor beneath Silas turned to liquid shadow. Silas Vane, the arbiter intoned. For treason. For breaking the peace. For stupidity. No. Silas screamed, clawing at the air. I am a lord. I demand. The shadows surged up, wrapping around him like tendrils of tar. They pulled him down, swallowing his legs, his waist, his chest. "Mark!" Silas shrieked. "Help me!" Mark, who had been cowering in the corner, peed himself. He scrambled backward, tripping over his own feet, sobbing. The shadows covered Silas's head. There was a wet, crunching sound, and then silence. The floor solidified. Silas was gone. The Arbiter looked at Mark. The human was curled in a fetal position, shaking violently. "And the human?" the Arbiter asked Valerius. "He is a witness. He is a loose end." Valerius looked at Alara. "It is your choice." Alara walked over to Mark. He looked up at her, tears streaming down his face. He looked pathetic. "Small." "Alara," he blubbered. "Please. I'm sorry. I love you. We can go home." Alara looked down at him. She felt nothing. No fear. No anger. Just pity. "I am home," she said. She turned to the Arbiter. "Let him go. He knows our secrets," the Arbiter noted. "He won't tell anyone," Alara said. "Because if he does, I'll know." She touched the mark on her forehead. "And I'll come for him." Mark went pale. He nodded frantically. "I won't say a word. I swear. I swear." "Get him out of my sight," Valerius commanded. 2 guards dragged Mark away. He didn't fight. He was broken, not by violence, but by the realization that he was no longer the scary one in the room. The Arbiter sat back down. He looked at Valerius and Alara. "This is irregular," the Arbiter said. "A human channeling vampire power. A king bound to immortal. It upsets the balance." "The balance was already upset," Valerius said. "Silas broke it. We restored it." The Arbiter considered this. He looked at the ledger. "You have done the court a service," the Arbiter admitted. "Silas's corruption ran deep. Without this evidence, he would have rotted us from the inside." He tapped his cane. "Valerius Blackwood, you are reinstated as king of the Night Court. Your lands are restored. Your actions are pardoned." He turned his milky gaze to Alara. "And you, Alara Vance. You are an anomaly. But you have proven useful. The Aeterna Custodia stands. You are under the protection of the crown." He paused, a dry, dusty smile touching his lips. "Though, judging by that shield, I suspect the crown is also under the protection of you." The sun was rising as they walked out of the symphony hall. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the sky a brilliant, washed-out blue. The air smelled fresh. Valerius walked slowly, his hand resting on Alara's shoulder. They reached the sedan, but Valerius didn't open the door immediately. He turned to her, leaning against the car. He looked tired, older than his years, but the weight that had been on his shoulders since the garage was gone. "You channeled my power," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "That should have killed you." "I was motivated," Alara said, leaning against the car beside him. She touched the spot on her forehead. It felt natural, like borrowing a cup of sugar from a neighbor. A very angry, magical neighbor. Valerius laughed. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jaw. "You saved my life, Alara." "We're even," she said. "You saved mine. Twice." "What will you do now?" he asked. "Mark is gone. The threat is over. You could go anywhere. Paris. Rome. I could set you up with enough wealth to live like a queen." Alara looked at the city waking up around them. She thought about her old apartment, the diner, the tips, the fear. Then she looked at the manor in the distance, the library with the dust motes, the kitchen where Mr. Whiskers was probably eating salmon. She looked at Valerius. The monster who wasn't a monster. The king who was lonely. "I think," she said slowly, "that I need to get a new uniform. The black dress was nice, but it's a bit much for Tuesday." Valerius's eyes widened slightly. "You intend to stay?" "Well," Alara said, shrugging. "Mr. Whiskers likes the salmon. And Elias promised to teach me how to use a crossbow. And someone needs to make sure you don't get into trouble with the council again." Valerius smiled. It was a real smile this time, warm, radiant, and breathtaking. "I suppose I do need a keeper," he murmured. He opened the car door for her. "Let's go home, Alara." The garden was in full bloom. Roses, deep crimson and startling white, climbed the stone trellises of the manor. Alara sat on a stone bench, a laptop open on her knees. She was typing furiously. Section 4, Paragraph 2, she muttered. The allocation of funds for the new youth shelter must be routed through the charitable trust, not the main accounts, or the IRS will get suspicious. You are terrifyingly efficient at money laundering, Elias said, dropping a basket of apples onto the bench beside her. It's not laundering, Elias, Alara said without looking up. It's creative philanthropy. We're using Silas's confiscated fortune to fund domestic violence shelters across the state. It's poetic justice. It's expensive, Elias grumbled, crunching into an apple. But Valerius seems to approve. Valerius approves of anything she does, a deep voice said. Valerius walked out onto the terrace. He looked healthy, the scars from the wolf venom long faded. He wore a casual shirt, sleeves rolled up, revealing the pale, strong forearms. He walked over to Alara and placed a hand on her shoulder. The connection between them hummed a low, constant note of comfort. The council is asking for you, Valerius said. Tell them I'm busy, Alara said, typing a final sentence. The grand opening is tonight. I have to make sure the mayor doesn't trip over the ribbon. They want to know if you will accept the title, Valerius said. Alara stopped typing. She looked up. The council had been pestering her for weeks. They didn't know what to call her. She wasn't a vampire. She wasn't just a human. She was the one who held the king's shield. I don't need a title, she said. Valerius smiled. He reached down and closed her laptop. They want to call you the anchor, he said. The one who holds the storm steady. Alara looked at him. She thought about the rain, the black car, the fear that had almost consumed her. She thought about the girl she used to be, and the woman she was now, a woman who managed a kingdom's finances, who trained with daggers, and who loved a monster. The anchor, she mused. It's heavy. It is necessary, Valerius said. He offered her his hand. Come. The sun is setting. The night is ours. Alara took his hand. She stood up, smoothing her dress. Ready for the night shift? She asked. Valerius pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead, right over the invisible mark that bound them together forever. With you, he whispered against her skin. Always. They walked back toward the manor, the shadows stretching long and protective around them, two broken things that had fitted together to make something unbreakable.